Cineguac.
What's going on? Welcome to Cineguac. In just a moment, I'll show you a short video clip and then walk you through exactly how to make it. In doing so, you'll learn all the basics of Adobe Premiere Pro. Everything from how to start a project, import your assets, make cuts, add music, create some fancy transitions, add titles, and then finally, how to export your final video. I'm using Adobe Premiere Pro CC 2019, but if you're using a different version, no worries, the interface doesn't change too much, so you should be able to follow along, no problem. So here is the video clip we'll be making today. I've included a link in the description below so that you can download all the light leak effects needed to make this video. It also includes time codes in the description just in case you want to fast forward to a particular part of the tutorial. So without further ado, let's start the education. So as you can see here, I have a folder on my desktop called My Video, and in it I have subfolders. I have Video, which basically just includes the video files I'll be using today. I have a music folder, which includes the song that I'll be using by Beethoven. Who doesn't like Beethoven? And I have an effects folder, which basically just includes a whole bunch of light leaks that I made myself. I like to sort of consolidate everything into one place just because it's easier, it's neater, it makes it more accessible if I need to access it later on. I know where everything is, and it sort of saves me a headache later on. Just a little side note, I'm using 2 video clips I purchased from Pond5, but what I'm showing you today can be done with any 2 video clips in the world. So grab your camera, your iPhone, whatever, and film your cat spitting up a hairball and your dog licking his butt, and that'll work just fine. So here's how you get started. First thing you want to do is open up Premiere. And once you reach your home page, what you want to do is start a new project. If you already have an existing project, of course you can open an already existing project, but in this case we're going to create a new one. So here we can rename our project. So let's call it Los Angeles. And we can save the location of our project file anywhere on the computer we want. So just hit Browse, and for simplicity's sake, let's save it to My Video. Hit Choose, and OK. So this is what the default editing workspace looks like. But if you're like, wait a minute, mine looks different, you can always go up here to Window, Workspaces, and select Editing, which will automatically reset it to the default settings. Each different type of workspace simply arranges the layout so that depending on what you're doing, all the tools you need are easily arranged and accessible. But today we're only going to be editing, so let's make sure we're in the editing workspace. Now, if you're looking at this and thinking to yourself, holy crap, there's so many buttons, this is so complicated, I give up. Don't you worry. You are in my delicate hands and it will all make sense by the end. Also, I'll be repeating the same information multiple times because I believe in the power of repetition. So if something doesn't make sense the first time, I can promise it will make sense by the end. So let me first give you a general idea of where everything is. As you can see, everything here is pretty much split up into 4 main quadrants. Down here to the bottom left is our project panel. This is where we import all of our media assets, like our music and our video clips that we want to cut together in our final video. Over here on the bottom right is our timeline, where we spend most of our time actually cutting everything together so it looks pretty. And as you can see, there's this little toolkit with various buttons which allows us to make cuts, drag our clips around, or even create titles. Again, don't be overwhelmed, this will all make sense very soon. Up here on the top left is our source monitor, where we can preview our media files. The only reason it's gray and empty is because we haven't imported anything into our project yet. And lastly, over here to the top right, we have our playback monitor, which quite literally plays back everything we've edited. You'll find yourself constantly going back and forth between these 2 monitors, first previewing the clips that you want, and then watching your final edited video. So the first thing you're going to want to do is import all of your assets that you need to create your video into Premiere. So what you can do is go down here and it says import media to start. Of course, you can either double click this area and it will open up this browser, or you can go to File, Import, and it opens up the exact same window. So let's just find our folder with all of our assets in it. Here it is. Now you can import an entire folder, or you can import individual files. So first let's import our video folder. So as you can see here, we have our video folder, and if you drop that down, you see our 2 video files in there. Now, let's go back to File, Import, and let's import our music. So here's our music folder. All right, now let's go back to File, Import, and import the last remaining assets that we're going to need, which is our effects folder. And in the effects folder, as you can see here, are all of the light leak effects that we'll be using. So let's import that. Based on however many files you have, it'll take a different amount of time to import. And as you can see here, now we have perfectly neatly arranged all of the folders that I just showed you a moment ago on my desktop. And at any time, you can preview any media file that you want. Just double-click on the file you want to preview, and it'll appear in the source monitor above. And you can just drag the playhead along and scrub through from beginning to end. So now that we have all of our assets imported into the project, we can start moving our media files over to the timeline to begin editing. Now there's a couple ways to do that. I'll begin by showing you the simplest way. First thing you want to do is go to your project, and let's begin by selecting the first video clip that we want to include in our final video. So all you got to do is click on it and hold it down and drag and drop that to the timeline. Now as you can see, the moment we did that, it created a new sequence here. A sequence is basically just a compilation of whatever you have in your timeline, sort of like a project within your project. You can have multiple sequences within the same project, which you're able to toggle between like tabs in your internet browser, but for now we're only going to be working with one sequence. Now the sequence is going to match the settings of whatever clip you drag onto the timeline first. So if your video was shot in 23.976 frames per second, then your sequence is going to play it back in 23.976 frames per second. If your video was shot in 4K, then your timeline is going to have 4K resolution. Once your clip is on the timeline, you can go over here to your toolbar and select the razor tool. Now the razor tool allows you to go anywhere on the clip and make cuts. So let's say you want your clip to begin there and end there. Then what you can do is go to your selection tool and delete everything around it that you don't want. And now as you can see, when you play that back, you only have the part of the clip that you used your razor tool to cut out. Now, I'm just arbitrarily making cuts here just to demonstrate how the razor tool works, but for now, let's just assume this is the exact part of the clip I want to include in my edit. So let's just undo all of this. I'm hitting Command-Z to undo. Of course, you can go to Edit, Undo at any time. But another way to sort of expedite the cutting process is here. Let's first zoom in here so that we can see this a little bit closer up. With your selection tool selected, you can go to the beginning or the end of every video clip and sort of drag it just to sort of find the in point and end point that you want. So here we can drag the beginning over here. And now as you can see, we only have this portion of the clip selected. And at any time, you can click on this and drag it all the way to the beginning so that there's not all this black space in the beginning. Now let's undo all of this. I'm just hitting Command-Z once again. So now that you know the easiest way to bring things to the timeline, let me show you another way. So you can go over here to the first video clip that you want to include in your video. And unlike last time where you just dragged and dropped this to the timeline, let's actually go ahead and double click this video file. And as you see here, it now appears in the preview monitor. And you can sort of scrub through the duration of the entire clip from beginning to end. And if you have a really good idea as to what part of the clip you actually want to include in your final video, then this tool is super helpful. You can go to the point of your clip that you want the shot to begin and hit the Mark In button, and then just move forward to the point where you want the clip to end and hit Mark Out. And then you can just go ahead and drag the video only to the timeline, or you can drag the audio only to the timeline, or you can just go ahead and click on the screen and drag both the audio and the video to the timeline. Now, as you can see, there's only one video clip that appeared on the timeline, and that's because this particular media file just has no sound. If there was audio in the media file, then you would see this little pink video clip right here, and an audio clip underneath on one of the audio layers. You'll also notice that just like before, it's going to create an entirely new sequence which you can rename whatever you want. So now that we have our first clip on the timeline, which lasts for about 3 seconds and 10 frames, what we want to do is add our second clip. So let's go to our second clip and double click on that. And that way we kind of have a little bit more flexibility to pick what part of the clip we actually want to bring onto our timeline. So let's just scrub through until we find a nice point of the clip that we like. I like the palm trees, so maybe we can start towards the beginning where we see this really big palm tree up close. And let's hit a mark in. And just move forward a couple seconds and hit mark out. And then let's just drag this video only to the timeline. And with this little tool right here, we can zoom in so that we have a better look at what it is that we're doing. Now, just to get rid of all this black space here, let's just click on this clip and drag it until it snaps into place. The snap function usually should work by default. So now, as you can see, we have 2 clips about equal length of one another on the timeline. And between them, we have a hard cut. So what we can do now is add a nice transition effect between them. Let's go to our effects folder, which, if you remember, we have a whole bunch of light leak effects. Now, I have a whole other tutorial on how to add light leak effect transitions to your videos, but I'll sort of just do the cliff notes here. What you want to do is just sort of find a nice light leak transition that looks good for your video. It's really just a matter of preference. When trying to find a good light leak transition, I like to find one that at one point during the clip, the flare sort of takes up the entire frame just because it hides the transition a little bit better. So once we've found what light leak we like, let's just drag and drop that onto the timeline above our 2 already existing clips. Now, whatever is on top is what you see. So even though we have our video clips on the timeline, the screen is black because right now, as you can see, it's on top of the video clips. So all we see is a black screen. And if you play that through, you'll see the light leak effect. So first thing we want to do, like I said before, is we want to find a part of the light leak effect where the burn takes up the entire frame. So we want this point of the light leak to occur at exactly this cut between our 2 video clips. So here's how I personally would do it. I would drag the beginning of the clip to that point. It'll snap right into place. So now our light leak clip begins where the flare takes up the entire frame. And then let's just drag that over until it snaps into place, perfectly aligned with the cut of our 2 video clips. And then drag the beginning of the light leak effect all the way back as far as it goes to the beginning. And to get rid of the black so that only the light leak flare shows, let's highlight the light leak layer and then go to our Effect Controls panel. And right here under Opacity and Blend Mode, there's a drop-down menu. And there's a whole bunch of different options that you can choose from. And each one sort of gives your light leak layer a different effect. This is what Multiply does. Color burn, as you can see, it changes based on whatever it is you choose. But in this case, let's choose Lighten. And the reason why I choose Lighten is because, as you can see, it makes all the black areas of the screen completely transparent while brightening the base colors or lighter areas of the screen, making for a really awesome effect. So when we play it through, it looks almost seamless. Now, I do notice that there's a hard cut. If you notice at the top right of the frame, the sun kind of just pops on, and it doesn't look that smooth. So a good way around that would be to add a cross dissolve between our two video clips. So what we do is go to our effect window, go to video transitions, go to dissolve, and drag the cross dissolve effect in between our two video clips. Now the cross dissolve does exactly what it sounds like. It literally just dissolves your first clip seamlessly into your second clip. Now if we don't change the duration that it lasts for, here's what it looks like. It actually looks pretty good, but you kind of see the beginning of the cross dissolve, which I want to avoid. I want the transition to only happen with the light leak effect. So we can actually shorten the duration of the cross dissolve, maybe by half, by simply dragging and dropping. And so now when we play it back, we have a seamless light leak transition. So now that we have a perfect seamless light leak transition between our two video clips, let's open the video with a nice effect. So there's a bunch of effects that you can choose from. I'm just going to show you one in particular. So let's first go to our effect window and let's just type in barn doors. So that would be under the video transitions wipe subfolder. You'll find the barn doors effect. And let's just drag and drop that to the very beginning of our first video clip. So now when you go to the beginning and you play that through, it sort of has a nice crop effect from east to west or from left to right. But I kind of prefer it to open up from the middle and move north and south or up and down. So what you can do is instead of selecting the video clip, simply select the transition, barn door transition itself. So only that's selected. And as you notice, the moment you click on that, this whole window opens up under the effects control panel. And if you go right over here to this button, north to south, and click that, it now changes the direction that the barn doors open. And you have a really nice cinematic barn door transition, which is a great way to open your video. And like any other effect, you can sort of hover your mouse over the beginning or end of the transition and sort of drag it so that it lasts however long or short you want it to last. So let's drag this out a little bit longer. So now as you can see, when we play that through, it's a very nice, slow, cinematic transition. So the way that you do this is go to your title tool right here, or you can just hit T on your keyboard, and then go to the approximate part of the frame where you want your title to live. I say approximate because you can always change it later, and click. And as you see, the moment you click, a new graphic layer appears on video 1. So let's go ahead and type whatever it is that we want to type. Now you can treat this graphics layer the same way you would any other video layer. So with that layer selected, it's now going to open up in effects controls all the things that we're able to do to manipulate this image. So let's drop down this little menu right here where it says text Los Angeles, and let's just double click our text so that we can change the font. And let's find something really nice and simple and cinematic. Helvetica looks nice. And here we can adjust the size however we want. And we can also adjust the spacing between the letters. Something really nice and sleek. Go to the selection tool, and let's just try to center this. Looks like it might be a little bit on the large side, so let's just make it a little bit smaller and center it. Now, if you were to go to the graphics workspace, there's a lot more options, including a button that even allows you to center your text perfectly, but we can eyeball it for now and stay in the editing workspace just to make things simple. So once we found where we want our text to live, let's find where we want the text to appear in the video. So if we play it through, we have our light leak transition. It might be nice to have our title appear over this second video clip. So because we want the light leak to appear on top of everything, the video and the text, let's move that one layer up to make room for our title effect, which will slide in underneath. And let's just adjust the end of this title so that it lasts for the exact same amount of time as our video clip underneath. That way, as you can see now, when the video clip ends, so does the title. And when we play it through, we have our light leak transition, and then our Los Angeles title pops onto frame. Now, let's animate the title so that it slowly moves towards us. The way that you do that is make sure your title layer is selected. Go to your vector motion in your effect control window and go all the way to the very beginning of your title layer. Let's set a keyframe for scale. So right now we're telling Premiere to remember that at the very first frame, the scale will be a perfect 100. Then let's move this all the way to the very end of our text layer and set the scale to 107. So now, as you can see, over the duration of the entire clip, it's going to slowly move from a scale of 100 to a scale of 107. And what that does is it gives it the effect that the title is actually moving towards us. Now, to get rid of that effect where the title just sort of jumps on the screen, let's add a nice smooth cross dissolve so that the title fades in. And the way that we do that is the exact same way that we added the barn doors transition. Let's go to our effect controls, go to video transitions, dissolve, and drag our cross dissolve onto the beginning of our text layer. So now, as you can see, when we play it through, it slowly fades onto screen. The title moves towards us, and that's it. Now what we can do is add a cross dissolve to the end of the title, and while we're at it, let's add a cross dissolve to the end of our video clip. That way, everything fades out all at once. Now we could end right there, but just to make it a little bit fancier and more dynamic, let's add a nice blur effect so that as the Los Angeles title fades in, it comes into focus, and as it fades out, it goes back out of focus. So the way that we want to do that is in our effects panel, let's type in Gaussian blur. And that can be found under video effects, blur and sharpen. And here it is. Let's just drag that effect onto the text layer. And now what we're going to do is set some keyframes the exact same way that we just set keyframes for the scale a moment ago. So let's go to the very, very beginning of our text layer. As you can see here, we're at the very first frame. And right here where it says Gaussian blur, let's set a keyframe for the blurriness. And let's start the blurriness at a value of 135. So if 0 is no blur, 135 is pretty blurry. Now let's move forward to the point where the fade in of our title ends. So as you can see right now, this is 135 value of blurriness. Let's set another keyframe for 0. So now we have two keyframes, one at 135 and one at 0. So when you play that through, it slowly fades in from blur to no blur. Now let's do the exact opposite. At the end of the title, where the crossfade begins, let's set a keyframe right here for 0. And let's move this all the way to the end and set another keyframe for 135. That way the title sort of gets a little bit blurry as it fades out. The same exact way that you dragged video onto the timeline, you can drag audio onto the timeline. So let's go back to our project window, and right here in our music folder, let's find the song that we want. There's only one by Beethoven, and let's drag that onto the timeline, right onto audio layer 1. And let's just zoom out so that we see how long it lasts for. Now, the song is obviously a lot longer than the video, so I think the easiest way to do this would be to go to the end of the clip, hover your mouse over, and just drag it all the way to the end until it snaps into place. And let's just zoom in. Now you can see the song ends at the exact same frame as your title and your video end. But instead of it just coming to an abrupt stop, let's add a nice fade out of the audio. And the best way to do this would be the same way that we added a nice fade in and fade out for our video. So let's just go to our effects panel. And right here under audio transitions, crossfade, we'll see a whole bunch of different types of crossfade options. Now, you can choose whichever one works for you. Constant power is one that I use a lot. Exponential is one that I use a lot. Basically, the difference is just one fades out exponentially. The other one is a slow, gradual dissolve. Let's choose exponential fade. And we can adjust the duration of the fade. So now it'll start fading out right here and end fading out at the end. And if you would like to adjust the overall volume of your music, say it's a little bit too loud, what you can do is just click on your audio layer, and right here in Effect Controls, under Volume and Level, you can select this and drop it down a few decibels, let's say -3, and hit Enter, and now your entire song is 3 decibels less than it was. Now, you can export in a whole bunch of different formats. You can prepare it for a post house to get colored, but I'm just going to show you the simple way to export if you want to upload your video to the web, like YouTube or Vimeo. So here's how you do that. With your sequence selected, let's go to File, Export, Media, and right here under Format, I use H.264, that's a common format, and under Preset, Premiere comes with a whole bunch of already existing presets. So if you want to upload to YouTube, there's a whole bunch of different presets right here specifically for YouTube. You can export in 1080p, you can export in 4K, 480, 720, you name it. Same thing goes with Vimeo. So in this case, let's just export for YouTube 4K because the video clips that I'm working with are shot in 4K, so might as well export in 4K as well. So let's select that. As you can see here, it says the estimated file size is 41 megabytes. And right here, let's choose where we want to save it. Output name, so let's just click on this. And for simplicity's sake, let's select desktop and change the name to Final Video. Hit save. Make sure your video and your audio are selected. That way you'll be exporting both audio and video. And just hit export. And depending upon how long your video clip is, that's about how long it will take to encode and export your sequence. Thanks for watching. Make sure you hit the subscribe button if you want to learn more. And don't forget to mention my name in your acceptance speech when you win an Oscar for Best Editing.